We're currently 3 episodes into the 5-episode Crisis on Infinite Earths run, and while we haven't gotten the resolution to a lot of things yet, certain things that I'm not going to talk about those things because there's obviously parts 4 and 5 to go over that, I still think that I want to go over certain things that would have changed about parts 1, 2, and 3 based off of what we've gotten so far. Now, this does not mean by any means necessary that I dislike this crossover at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I absolutely loved part 1 and I absolutely loved part 3. It's really just part 2 that I didn't love. However, I still think it was good, and it had a lot of great moments, and I think, in fact, this crossover is getting so much more hate than it deserves. People saying that it doesn't live up to the hype, or it's rushed, or they give a disservice to certain characters. I really don't think that. There are obviously changes I would make, but overall, I'm very happy with how the crossover has been going so far. With that in mind, however, in this video, I'll be going over the 5 things that I would have changed about the first 3 episodes of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and this is all going to be within the confines of the possibility of what they were given, specifically the budget. Anything too high budget, I'm not going to be talking about that because there's really no point, because they literally could not have done that, but also anything that they were restricted from doing by Warner Brothers, like I'm guessing using Wonder Woman or even Green Lantern, or obviously they said they're not allowed to call them the Justice League. I'm not going to be talking about any of those things because they were not allowed to do that. This is just the 5 things that I would have changed within the confines of what was possible. With that in mind, let's begin with number 5, which I gotta say, this is not going to be in any particular order, it's just 5 things. So first thing I'll talk about is something that I've already made a whole video about, so if you want to hear about that in more depth, I talked about that in that video, but I'm not going to make you go watch an entire new video just for something that's a part of this video, so I will talk about basically everything. But again, if you want to hear about it more in depth, like the explanations for literally everything about why I said this, check out that video. But this is all about the Paragons, because I think with the Paragons, the 7 greatest heroes in the entire multiverse, they didn't really do a great job with bringing them together. The Paragons they have are the Flash, Supergirl, Martian Manhunter, Superman replaced by Lex Luthor, Ryan Choi, Batwoman, and White Canary. And there are so many things that would change about this group for so many reasons. Reason number 1 is because while they weren't allowed to use the name Justice League, I think the Paragons, without the name Justice League, could have made for such a great Justice League, and characters like Ryan Choi, Batwoman, White Canary, and even Lex Luthor when he replaces Superman, just makes it look so much less like a Justice League than it could, especially with characters like the Flash, Martian Manhunter, and the Superman that was replaced before Lex Luthor came around. Those characters that really made this look like a Justice League. The second reason is narratively, characters like Ryan Choi, Batwoman, White Canary, and even Superman from Earth 96 don't really fit the group of Paragons as much as certain other characters, namely Green Arrow, Black Canary, and any other character that was in Elseworlds, or really any other character who was tested by the Monitor. Those characters fit the Paragons so much better. The third issue is that this team is just not diverse enough when it comes to the multiverse. The Monitor said that these heroes, the Paragons, are from all across time and the multiverse, and yet not only are they all from the present day, but also they're all from Earth 1 and Earth 38, and while yes, there is the Earth 96 version of Superman, he was replaced by an Earth 38 character, and that's Lex Luthor. And while I don't think there's a problem with them not being from across time, it's from across time because he did say that now is the age of heroes, so all the Paragons could be from the present day, but I do think that they should have been from across the multiverse or spread out across the multiverse a little bit more. With that in mind, in order to solve these 3 problems, make the Paragons look more like a Justice League, make them fit the storylines a little bit better, and also make them more diverse in the multiverse, this is what I think they should have looked like. From Earth 1, you have Green Arrow and the Flash, obviously the main characters of the Arrowverse, but also I think John Diggle's Green Lantern and the Earth 1 Batman. The first 3 characters, Green Arrow and the Flash and Green Lantern, did have some crisis setup, especially Green Arrow and the Flash, so narratively it very much fits. Green Lantern had all the setup, or John Diggle had all the setup to become Green Lantern going into the crisis, so I think that fits as well, and he could be the Paragon of Willpower, which very much works. And Batman, considering the Justice League thing, I really think he would have worked a lot better than Kate Kane's Batwoman, and this would have been a great time to introduce him. From Earth 38, Martian Manhunter and Supergirl, two very prominent members of the Justice League, 2 characters from Earth 38. And also, they have the crisis setup of being tested by the Monitor, Supergirl, and Elseworlds, as well as Martian Manhunter in Supergirl Season 5. So those 5 characters from Earth 1 and Earth 38 should definitely be Paragons, but that leaves 2 more. In order to make it as diverse as possible for the multiverse, the characters are from non-Earth 1 or Earth 38 universes, but also from 2 different universes. This also would fit the Justice League, as the characters are Superman from Earth 96, as well as Black Canary from Earth 2. Now, Black Canary, I'm not going to talk about Superman very much, because he already was a Paragon in the crossover. However, Black Canary, I think this is probably the number one thing I would have changed about the entire first three parts of the crossover, and that's the inclusion of Black Canary. It's so weird she wasn't included, not only because she's a very prominent member of the Justice League, so she would fit the Paragons very well, but also she's from another universe, so it diversifies this version of the Paragons a lot more than it originally was. But also the Crisis setup, more than anything, it really shows she should have been in the crossover, as except for maybe Barry Allen and Oliver Queen, she had literally more Crisis setup than anybody in the entire multiverse. And this is from Arrow Season 8, with the storyline of her world being destroyed, her dealing with that, but also she was legitimately tested by the Monitor, and after a character is tested by the Monitor, it's really weird that they don't end up being a Paragon, let alone the fact that they're not even in the crossover. So I think more than anything, and I'm talking about it here because it fits in with the Paragon thing as well, Black Canary is a character who I would have put in this crossover, and that's the number one change I would have made to Crisis on Infinite Earths. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to count that thing I talked about with the Paragons and Laurel as two separate things, because while yes, I think changing the Paragons and also including Laurel are kind of connected, I'm a lot more adamant about them including Laurel, as again, that's the number one thing I would have changed about the crossover, so it is separate than changing the Paragons. So I guess this is going to be number 3 on a list that isn't in any specific order. So number 3 is going to be the unnecessary storylines that either I think shouldn't have existed or they could have changed it to make it unnecessary. The two most unnecessary storylines I think are from part 1, where Sarah, Brainy, and Lois go to Earth 16.
Unnecessary.
Not only was this completely unnecessary, and I just don't understand why it existed, but also if the purpose of its existence was to show that Earth 16 was the universe they went to in Star City 2046, to show that that's an alternate universe and not the future or some sort of alternate future, then at least they should have made it like connect to the established canon of Earth 16 that was established in Star City 2046. That timeline or that universe was the universe where the Legends left and never came back. And because of that, because White Canary and the Atom weren't around to help Oliver and the rest of Star City or Starling City, the city was taken over by the Deathstrokes, or that gang led by Grant Wilson. However, in Earth 16 and Crisis on Infinite Earths, Sarah, Brainy, and Lois go there, and it's a universe that Sarah never came back from Lian-Yu, never became the Canary, never became the White Canary, and the Legends don't exist. So the continuity here just doesn't fit whatsoever, which makes this storyline completely unnecessary, but also it kind of breaks the canon if they're saying that Star City 2046 is the same universe. There was also, in part 2, a storyline that was kind of unnecessary, which is a lot more disappointing than what was unnecessary in part 1, as part 2 storyline was really exciting, and it ended up being unnecessary, which is certainly disappointing. That storyline is where Kara and Kate went to Earth 99 to meet up with Bruce Wayne and recruit him as a Paragon, but it ended up being that he's not a Paragon, and that Kate Kane from Earth 1 was. I think that this was unnecessary because the Monitor sent her there to learn that she was a Paragon, but she didn't learn that she was a Paragon until she came back with the Paragon detector saying that it was her. So what was the point of them going to Earth 99 and meeting up with this Earth 99 version of Bruce Wayne, other than just to show Batman? And yes, it was cool to see Batman, especially one played by Kevin Conroy. An old version of Batman played by the most beloved Batman actor ever, Kevin Conroy, was cool. In the end, it was pretty much unnecessary, and I really think they should have made it necessary in some way. And for this video, I'm not going to go over how I think they should have made it necessary, because I honestly don't know how they could have made all these storylines necessary or like fit the storyline as much as possible, but I really think they could have done a better job with those specific things. Probably the most anticipated cameo in the entirety of the crossover was, I think, Tom Welling's Clark Kent from Smallville, as people really wanted to see that character again. The show was very popular when it was originally airing, but also more than probably any show that's ever existed or any movie, it connects very much to the Arrowverse, as it's like the precursor to the Arrowverse. I mean, it literally, the Arrow was originally going to be a spin-off from Smallville, starring Justin Hartley, so it definitely is very connected to the Arrowverse. But yeah, there was a lot of hype for this cameo. It ended up being that he had one scene really where he said that he lost his powers, and that's really all we got from him. Now, I don't really know if this was disappointing for people or not. I do see some mixed opinions about that, but I am a little bit disappointed, as Greg Berlanti said there's going to be a scene with 3 different Superman, and that is still possible, but it is possible that he was not telling the truth, or that he didn't really mean that, as we never really got that in the first 3 episodes, and I think part 2 could have been the perfect time to get that. Tyler Hoechlin Superman, Brandon Routh Superman and then Tom Welling Superman could have shared a scene together, and I really think that would have been cool. And that's really all I have to say here. I just think Tom Welling could have still had his powers, or Tom Welling's Clark Kent could have still had his powers at this point and could have suited up as Superman, I guess technically for the first time ever, and teamed up with Tyler Hoechlin and Brandon Routh's Superman. To see those three Supermen on screen together like the original Crisis, which had the Earth 1, Earth 2, and Earth Prime versions of Superman / Superboy on screen together, I really think it would have been cool to see that in the crossover. Now, while I'm definitely very much enjoying the Crisis so far and I really like it, I do have one pretty major problem from parts 1, 2, and 3. In 2 out of 3 of these parts, Oliver Queen or Barry Allen don't have a very big role at all. These are the main 2 characters of the Arrowverse, and I really think they should have had a huge role in literally all 5 parts of the crossover. In part 1, Oliver had a huge role, however, Barry didn't. Then in part 2, neither of them really had that big of a role, and in part 3, Oliver had a pretty small role, while Barry certainly had a very big one. This is, I think, not what they should have done at all in all 3 parts, and then in also part 4 and 5, Oliver Queen and Barry Allen should have had a very, very big role, and I think I have a way of changing this. In part 1, Oliver had a huge role, and however, the Flash really didn't. Just focus on the Flash a little bit more, focus on what he's doing, show Grant Gustin interact with more heroes than he did in the crossover in the first part. That's what I would have changed to make Barry more prominent in part 1. In part 2, I do think the storyline with Barry trying to help recruit or resurrect Oliver was kind of unnecessary in the end. It could have fallen into the unnecessary storyline in the end because they didn't really need his body back for the whole thing. Constantine could have just sensed that it was impossible to bring his body back, so they need to bring his soul back, and that's when he becomes the Spectre, because his body is kind of unnecessary for the Spectre, as in part 3 it was destroyed while his soul as the Spectre still exists. So that whole storyline with Oliver, with Mia and Constantine and Sarah and Barry resurrecting Oliver was completely unnecessary. So I think in part 2, Constantine, maybe also Barry, maybe Diggle and Mia, that's when they should have went to Purgatory and met up with Lucifer and then went to Purgatory and got Oliver's soul back. And then like in the entirety of part 3, Oliver has all these scenes with the Spectre, because I also think the Spectre or Jim Corrigan just didn't not have enough screen time in this crossover. It really would have been cool to see more of him, but I think that that whole storyline with the Spectre could have been more fleshed out, and that would be where part 3 comes in. Flash has his own storyline in part 3, but in part 2 specifically, neither of these characters really had much of a role, and I really would have changed that. In fact, apparently this was the first episode where Stephen Amell ever appeared where he didn't have any lines, and at the same time, Barry never suited up as the Flash. So in part 2, I think that whole storyline, again, like I said, with Lucifer, Mia, Constantine, and Diggle, getting Oliver, and then Oliver being approached by the Spectre, that all should have happened in part 2, while Barry has his own storyline as the Flash. I don't know what that storyline would be. It could be just helping recruit a Paragon as the Flash. That would have been cool. Then in part 3, like I said, Barry has his own storyline already, while Oliver has this extended period of time, all these scenes where he talks to the Spectre, is convinced to become the Spectre, and we get scenes like that. And I really think that that's maybe like a little bit less so than just including Laurel is the number one thing I would have changed about the first 3 parts of the crossover, which is Oliver and Barry just could have had so much more screen time, but also I think Jim Corrigan could have had more screen time as well. So anyway, those are the 5 things I would have changed about the first 3 parts of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, it is possible that some of the things that will be rectified in part 4 and 5, like maybe with the full finished product. Things like Oliver and Barry not having enough screen time in part 1, 2, and 3, or maybe even the Supermans teaming up, maybe those things will be rectified in parts 4 and 5. But for now, these are the things I would have changed about part 1, 2, and 3 without actually seeing the resolution to the crossover with parts 4 and 5. With that in mind, let me know what you thought about all of these changes in the comments down below. There's also going to be a poll in the top right corner of the video of which of these 5 changes do you think should have been implemented the most. But if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.